Rabbi Manis Friedman. Thank God it's Tuesday. Happy Passover. And of course, the question that I already just said to our audience in Russian, the question that I have for you is, do Jewish people have an alternate reality? Do we live in a bubble? How can we, when everything is going on and everybody is aware of how many terrible things are happening all over the world today, how can we be celebrating Passover? And, how can we be celebrating Passover no matter what?
It's a very good question. It's a question we have to ask ourselves. But we have some good answers too. First of all, just in general, not even when it's a holiday, for every death, there is a birth. We can't paint the world in one color. It's much too complicated, much too complex to make it so simplistic. So no matter how many painful things are happening, they're always offset with all the wonderful things that are happening. And that doesn't take away the pain. The painful things are painful. They're horrible. They're shocking. The immorality of it, the ugliness of it, and so on. You know, we say this every time it happens. In today's day and age? I remember back in the 60s. In the 60s? Wow, no, it couldn't happen in the 60s. But then I remembered when they were saying it in Germany. In Germany? In the most sophisticated, the most artistic, the most philosophical, the most advanced civilization? Come on, this is the 30s. This can't be happening now. We're doing it again. No, this can't be happening. Yes, it can, and it is. The question is, do we see only one half of the story, or do we see the whole story? And when we start looking at the whole story, we get a very different picture. There's a tiny minority of truly evil people. Why they always get the headlines, it's a whole different story. But they're a tiny minority. Look at the rest of the world. What's going on in the world is not evil, it's not destruction. It's goodness, wonderful things. So, it's not that one cancels the other. Just as the evil doesn't cancel out the good doesn't cancel out the evil. In terms of, dismissing it, ignoring it. So at the very least, we have to keep a balanced view. If we allow ourselves to be overly impressed with the ugliness and with the evil, then we're losing the battle. The historic battle, the eternal battle of good versus evil. So if we're too impressed with the evil, or we're too overwhelmed by it, we kind of surrender to it and we start to worship it. Like, there will never be an end. There will always be war. There will always be murder. There will always be... Always? That's a long time. To attribute eternity, even though you don't really mean it that way, but if you cannot imagine a world without war, then war has become your God. And that's certainly not kosher. And that's certainly not helpful. Not going to win a war that way. So let's at least keep a balanced view. But really, It's not 50-50. It's not half and half. The good is much more powerful. The good is eternal. The good is forever. The evil is not. So if you want to worship the good. Don't worship the evil.
Rabbi Friedman, but I'm sure everybody is asking the same question about that we asked 70 years ago. And especially now, especially where everyone with a cell phone knows exactly what is going on everywhere, we're asking a question. If there's more good than evil, how come we're letting this happen? We let it happen 70 years ago, and we're letting it happen now. How come if there's more of us and there's more good in the world, how come evil sort of won? I don't know if it won, but it certainly made a horrible impact then, and it's making a horrible impact now. Why?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that we used to have a top-down system. There were people in power, there were powerful governments, there were powerful movements, powerful leaders, and they controlled everything. When they went bad, there was hardly anything anyone could do. But today it doesn't seem to be the same thing. We don't give them that much power. We're not looking to them for control or for solutions. So the silent majority is much more active than it used to be. They don't control the headlines, that's for sure. But if you want to know what life is all about, look to them. Look at what life is for the average person. Much better than it was in the 30s. Much better. So, I mean, this is one of the predictions, one of the prophecies, that before Mashiach comes, there will be no leadership. So we always thought that would be like a devastating disappointment, and we would be desperate for leadership. Now it turns out that there will be no leadership means we're not going to depend on them. We're not going to look to them for leadership. The average person is now in control of his life. So the silent majority are living their lives according to what they think is right and good and proper, and that's a vast improvement. So can we control what's going on? I'm not sure we need to. We just need to outlast them. They're going to kill themselves, they're going to destroy themselves, they're going to undo themselves, because they've got nothing except the headlines, which depresses us.
Rabbi Friedman, I got to tell you, I was under the impression that I was keeping it together, thanks to you, of course, by a lot. But then in preparation for Passover, I went ballistic. My knees are still hurting from washing the floors. I koshered even the doorknobs. I took my toothbrush and a toothpick and cleaned out every socket and light bulb in the house. And then I realized, why am I going so insane? Because I'm getting desperate. And I think I probably represent a majority of people who can't stand it anymore. So this outlasting is not as easy as we had hoped for. This outlasting part is probably something that we weren't prepared too well for. So Rabbi Friedman, please advise us on how do we handle this outlasting part, because I think this is what we're up against now, and I think this is the biggest challenge for everybody.
That's a beautiful example. When you couldn't take it anymore, what did you do? You got the house really pesachdik. That's perfect. When we can't stand the evil, we turn to the good more intensely, more sincerely, maybe even a little desperately. But that is so good. It's exactly what I'm talking about. The evil is not corrupting us. In a sense, it's empowering. We are not going to be part of that. We are not going to contribute to that. We're going to go in the opposite direction, which is exactly right. Exactly right. And if enough people do that, then the tiny minority of evildoers, they have no one to fight but each other, and may they both be successful.
Rabbi Friedman, however, the fear, the confusion, the desperation, the intolerance, all those feelings are elevating and accelerating. And I'm sure I speak for the majority of the people, because everything is just coming, we're good people, as you said, and to stomach everything that we know is happening out there, and we can't turn away from it, because we were very privileged my community was very privileged to host one family from Ukraine who were observing and still are observing Passover with us, and the stories that they told us and the things that are happening, and this is straight from the source, it's not from the internet. It's not easy. We don't even know, we'd like to think there's some goodness behind everything that is going on, but when you hear the real stories from real people in real time, that puts a very different perspective on the situation.
Oh, it's horrific. It is horrific. But here's the real story. The real story is that the masks are no longer necessary on airlines. You may wear a mask if you wish to, but they're not going to enforce it anymore. What exactly does that mean?
That we were fooled all along.
You would think that somebody would have the decency of saying, those who were against were right. The masks were completely unnecessary. They did no good. Then you hear these reports. Thousands of women in France have become infertile because of the vaccinations. Thousands. And they say that that's just 5 to 10% of people reporting. So they laughed, they mocked it. They said it's just a conspiracy theory. No, it's not. Will somebody have the decency to get up and say you were right? The religious communities in New York were criticized and condemned for not taking the isolation and the masking and the distancing, not taking it seriously. Can somebody please have the decency to say, how come you were so smart? You were right. So all that's really missing is a little honesty. Now that it's out, there's not a debate anymore, right? Now that it's out, all it takes is to say, how come you knew? What makes you so strong or so clear-minded that you didn't get fooled? You didn't fall for it. So it's all going to come out. I mean, it's already coming out. will those who are responsible, will they have the decency to apologize? I don't know what they can do to make up for it. The damage that was caused to children, to schools, to education, to religion, the disruption of everything important. I mean, who's going to make up for that? But at least a little confession. That's all it takes. That's all it's missing. Yes, there were bad people, they did bad things. So what should happen? They should all die? No, they should all realize their mistake and say, I'm sorry. Why is that so unthinkable? Oh, no, they're never going to apologize.
Do you think that would be enough, just an apology?
What more can they do? Pay for the damages?
I'm sure people will want blood.
And what will that do for the women who can't have babies? For young girls who have stopped having their period. I'm sure they'll find a cure. That would be helpful. Spend a lot of money finding a cure, an antidote. There's got to be. But you can see how easily evil can get canceled. Number one, expose it. Exposed, it's gone, it's finished. How they were able to mask this whole craziness in the name of decency, in the name of public concern, in the name of... I don't know how they could do it. But, as you mentioned, now that we have internet, now that we have cell phones, now that we have... hiding things is not as easy as it used to be. Even in Russia.
Rabbi Friedman, a lot of the people, well, the same thing is happening with the war that happened with COVID. I mean, there are two sides, and it seems like each side is claiming morality. One side is claiming morality that, you know, this war has to be won by a certain side. The other side is claiming morality, that they're destroying immorality, Nazism, biolabs, and fighting the evil. So it's very hard to, again, understand, just like it was with the masks. Are the masks protecting the society, or are they destroying the society? Now we're finding out that they are destroying the society, but when they were mandated, they were for the safety of the society. So we have the same thing where we, again, don't know the truth. We know the horrific side effects of the actions, but again, where is the truth in this war?
So, speaking of Passover...
Good save, Rabbi Friedman.
There's a question that everybody asks. Why was Pharaoh punished? God decreed that the Jewish people should be enslaved by a foreign nation. So what Pharaoh was doing was really just fulfilling a prophecy. Why was he punished? Well, the simple answer is he wasn't doing it because there's a prophecy. He was doing it because of selfish interest and motivation. But there's an even better answer. Even if he was doing it because God declared that there should be an enslavement, he took it too far. He enjoyed it too much. The enthusiasm and the, oh, I'm doing this for God. Yeah, but you can do it with a little hesitation, you know. Drowning little boys in the Nile. I mean, come on. Is that a necessary part of slavery? So you added your own evil to what may be legitimate. War is hell, but it's not necessarily illegitimate. But the stories you're hearing of just personal meanness, bloodthirsty. Those things are pretty shocking. It's not just, shelling and shooting. There's some really nasty stuff going on. I don't know if it ever existed before. To cremate every soldier that dies so that there won't be a funeral, so that the country won't know how bad things were. If that's true, that's an evil that is completely unprecedented. And that is not part of anyone's decree. That's just ugliness. That's just, that's demented.
Rabbi Friedman, actually, this is one of the things I have on my things to ask you today, because there is so much atrocity. It's not just a war where you have to win, take over, territorial or moral or whatever it is. However, when people speak to each other, and this is the hardest part, the atrocities, that's the hardest part. We've had wars before, but what happens during the war, especially to non-military people, to children and women and the elderlies, and those who are not a part of it altogether, but there are atrocities happening to the human race in general, and yet some people will have a comeback for that one and say, well, all is fair in love and war. And I don't know, I hear it a lot, but it's a war. Like that makes things okay or acceptable, or, what kind of an answer is that?
Well, all is fear in love and war. Yeah, that's true. But I think the meaning of that is to conclude a victorious war, everything is fair. But gratuitous violence that does not contribute to the success of the campaign. So going back to your question, you have two sides, each one claims to have moral reasons. Yeah, but if somebody performs these atrocities and says it's all for the good, it's a little hard to believe. So you're fighting a war for the good? Everybody always claimed that. But you're torturing individuals, you're cremating, no. All of a sudden, I don't believe your claims of moral motivation. It doesn't add up. So we can't be fooled that easily. I'm going to torture this child or this woman, I'm going to leave them bleeding in the streets because it's all for the good. I'm sorry. No. If you were motivated by good, this wouldn't happen.
Rabbi Friedman, for a normal person, it's very hard for a good person. It's very hard to understand what can get a person to this level of, because yes, there are countries that are fighting the wars, but there are people who are committing the crimes of war crimes. So my question would be, how can it be, the evil is strategizing, but the human race or humans or some humans are actually committing those war crimes? How can people get to that level that they can be so cruel towards each other? How can we get to that stage? Or is that a bad question? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be asking it.
Yeah, and maybe I shouldn't answer it. But I'm going to anyway.
Thank you.
Is it that there are good people who become evil during a war, during a crisis? Maybe. But it's also possible that there are two different kinds of humans. Literally two different kinds of humans. Those who can and those who can't. There are many, many human beings who cannot do that, even if they're told to. Cremate your fallen comrade. Sorry. Can't do it. There are such people. They cannot. Chaos, panic, doesn't matter. They can't do it. Like Hasidim used to say, self-sacrifice, the project must succeed and you have to sacrifice yourself for the cause. I can sacrifice myself by jumping off the roof. But if you tell me to jump onto the roof from the ground, no amount of self-sacrifice, I can't do that. It's not humanly possible. So there are those human beings who cannot. They cannot. They can't chop people's heads off. They can't. They can't roll over them on a tank. Even if they're told, even if they want to, they can't do it. They'll be sick for a week if that. And then there are those who can. They don't always do this, but given a little chaos, given a little permission, or the thought that they can get away with it, they'll do it because they can. And that just shows a different quality of person. Different species, call it whatever you want. Certainly a different soul. So there are people who have native goodness, not learned, not acquired, because what you learn you can forget quite easily in a panic or in a time of war. So it's not acquired, it's not learned, it's not from religion. It's the soul. There are certain people whose souls have this softness or this gentleness. They can't. They can't. They have a built-in regulator that will not permit them to go beyond angry words or whatever. And then there are those who have no governor, they have no limits, and if you give them permission, there's nothing stopping them. Those kinds of people have to eventually destroy themselves. They've got nothing to live for. Not that they can't do any good, but when it comes to evil, there's no limit. There's no limit.
So, Rabbi Friedman, you're saying that people are born evil, or can they become evil, or do they need to have something already there to become evil?
They're not born evil, but they're born without a natural, organic limit to their evil. So, of course, if they don't want to get caught or if they don't want to be embarrassed, they won't do anything evil. But once those imposed restrictions go away, they have no internal restrictions. It's like Gandhi was able to defeat the British by passive resistance. Lay down in front of the tanks and you disable them.
Amazing.
Would that have worked if Jews would lay down in front of German tanks?
And no, it would work for the other side.
Right. So for some reason, the British, as a rule, could not drive their tanks over bodies. They couldn't. Maybe they wish they could, but they couldn't. And so Gandhi won. But that would not have worked with the Nazis. And that's really what is scary to the average person. To the Jews, it's a different story. But to the average human being, they didn't stop. No, they were following orders. Most people can't understand that. Yeah, you were given an order, but how could you? How could you? And then go have supper? Shouldn't you at least be sick for a month?
Rabbi Friedman, is war and violence contagious? Because once that Pandora's box got opened, it seems like it got picked up by other people around the world, by other countries. I don't want to say people. So it seems like once it was okay in one place, it started to spread around. Is it a contagious kind of thing?
Well, you open the door, that's for sure. I don't know if it's contagious, but it's in a sense giving permission. In a time of war, you can loot and you can help yourself to things that are not yours. You can. It's available. So people give in to the temptation and take advantage. That doesn't mean that they're the totally evil kinds of people. In other words, not everybody's going to stoop to the unlimited atrocities that the average decent person finds distasteful and undoable. So yeah, it's pretty shocking what we're hearing. But that's the good news. The average person is shocked. Which means that the average person is not the same as during World War II. Very few people were shocked. Even those who would never do it themselves. But they weren't shocked. Maybe they didn't hear all the gruesome details, but even after they heard it, it wasn't. I mean, there were those allies who came into the concentration camps and simply wretched. They were sickened. Couldn't believe what their eyes were seeing. That's a sign of a native decency, not an acquired. So this is where we're at. The world is getting better. Bad people are getting worse. But don't compare bad people to the world. They're a tiny minority.
Amazing, Rabbi Friedman. That's exactly what I personally wanted to hear today, because I needed to be reassured, because the question, based on everything that we see, is the world getting better? And thank goodness you're saying it is, and I tend to believe you. So I hope this has been very useful for others as well. Rabbi Friedman, we do have a few more minutes, so if we can maybe just speak about Passover. It's amazing how some people prepare for 3 months. Most people probably about a month intensely, and all of it is for this 8 days. Please explain how, and I don't know if people can imagine how how hard these preparations are, how intense they are. We don't use anything during this 8 days that we use throughout the year, and yet we do it with pleasure and enthusiasm. And Rabbi Friedman, please explain why this is a decree that the Jewish people have, and how can we explain it to the rest of the world that is totally worth it?
When the world becomes insanely destructive, the only way to combat that is to become insanely constructive. You can't fight extreme evil with moderate goodness. It's got to be an equal battle. It's not necessarily written, but people take advantage of the Pesach cleaning to make it a spring cleaning. It's not only getting rid of chametz, it's Just, like somebody said, dust is not chametz. And your family is not the Paschal sacrifice. So don't sacrifice your family, and don't make dust into. But it is the proper response to a world gone mad. If you're going to be a contender when the evil is mad, insane, then the goodness has to be insane. Insane means without economy. When you go all out and you say, I'm going to make my house completely, how much is it going to cost? No. I'm not counting. I'm not keeping record. That's insane. That's mad. But also the kindness that the world is showing. It's a madness. That's beautiful. Like every refugee who comes into another country, the people there almost force goods on you. They don't even ask you what you need. They force you to take something because they want to be useful. They want to be helpful. They want to be on the good side. I think that's really what it is. And that's global. All over the world, people suddenly want to be on the good side. Not neutral. Now, when's the last time that happened? So people are not content to just say, oh, those are bad people. No, there's like a madness. Let me do something good, please. Here, take. It's beautiful. So we're coming up to the 7th day of Passover. And you know what happened 7 days after the Jews left Egypt? The splitting of the sea, which is the miracle of miracles. Even the movie makers had a hard time creating that scene and special effects. You can't even fake it. So that was really the miracle of miracles. But the moral of it is, and the reason we're going to celebrate it and mark it and stay up all night is because when you're going to where you need to be, to keep an appointment with God, because God said, meet me at Mount Sinai, even an ocean cannot stop you. If you go with absolute conviction, with absolute confidence, the ocean will get out of the way for you. Morality is stronger than nature, because all of nature was created only to serve morality. And morality means your appointment with God. So when Jews needed to get to Mount Sinai, and there was an ocean in the way, and they asked God, so what do we do now? God said, go. You have an appointment. Keep the appointment. They said, yeah, but there's an ocean in the way. God said, what kind of excuse is that? So they went into the water, up to their nostrils, and that's when it split. So if we just keep going, we don't let nature get in the way, because nature exists to serve holiness. It's just when we give nature an inordinate amount of power, we say, oh, I can't do it. I'm going to get wet. Well, if you think you can't do it, then you paralyzed yourself. But if there's no question, God says go, you go. How does nature countermand God's instructions? Yes, God says to go, but it's cold out. Come on. So that basically is the moral. We had to learn that as soon as we came out of slavery, before we got to Mount Sinai. We needed to learn this very important message. Don't stop every time there's a difficulty. Don't quit every time there's a confusion or a question. Or you set out to serve God, you do it.
Rabbi Friedman, amazing. Thank you so much for another very, very powerful and much needed message in very, very difficult times for the world. Rabbi Friedman, thank you so much for everything that you do on daily basis and on weekly when it comes to us. It's amazing. May you and your family have a wonderful Passover, and boy, do we want Mashiach now.
I'll drink to that.
Thank you so much.